So do you guys want to start at the top, or is there ones we want to knock out that we're pretty confident we know? We have a pretty agreeable, it doesn't require a lot of dialogue.
Well, Highcroft, I feel I can't make decisions on that.
Yeah. The big ones, I think we should hold off until, I think we could do 8 Up the Road, which was Mr. Patrick. I'm not sure how you say his last name.
That was the one where there was an adjustment made and then it disappeared when the card was fixed.
Yeah, and I sent
That
you
seems
guys,
pretty straightforward.
yeah. The recommendation was to return the value back to what we had originally set it at 497. Did you guys see that? I sent you guys a text.
Yes, I saw that. I just want to double check one thing. Is it 497 or 476? I wonder if numbers got flipped, because if his estimated value is the 680,000, I got to 476.
That's how I read it.
Oh.
And then the town's current is 470, which went to 5, which is assessed at 515, 518.
It should be on. Yeah, we made a change.
The town had 497 even when you guys changed it last time.
Or the assessment value?
The assessment was 497 even.
Okay, that's the.
You should have that in your packet.
That's the assessed value, not the appraised value.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Everybody, I guess I'll make a motion to set the value of unique ID 302-04500 at 497,000 is the assessed value. I have a second.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You're referencing a $497,000 assessed value.
That's correct.
Yep.
So Jennifer, as far as filling out these, you want me to write in new assessment and then just my initials? What else do you want me to fill out on here? Obviously,
Assess the new figure should be in pencil if possible, if you have one.
pencil?
And your signature, and because it's verbally recorded, you can initial for Lori and Regina.
Okay. You said you wanted it in pencil?
Please.
Okay.
So not to have to revisit this. So if we're assessing him at 497 on the property sale, the market value would be 710. Is that what we're saying? We confirm that. And I know he bought for 720, but got the 40 back. So he was stating the market value is 680.
710,000 even is what the board had changed it to, which gives it an assessment of
Okay.
497 even.
Okay. All right. All right. And then his card is okay after this. I just want to make sure
Yes.
that's okay. All right.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. That's one down.
Why don't you go to the top?
In his motorhome, I mean, you guys kind of, there's
I don't
nothing,
think there's any action we can take as a board on that one.
there's nothing we can do. So, where did I put it?
One thing I was wondering, he had put the value at, he had a $6,900 difference in value between what we have and what he had. Does mileage apply in the same way? I don't know enough about motorhomes to know, because I know we've got the Baystar page on the back where the 112,900 came from.
Well,
That's 6,500 miles.
what are we valuing it at?
112,900. 112,900.
Because like between the trade and used and the used retail prices.
Are you asking me how I assessed it?
I thought it says 79 on here. That's the assessed value though, right?
Yeah.
Well, we
I
we
used-
see the document here, Francine. I guess the only question I had is if there's any mileage on it, that wondering what his $6,000 discrepancy is from what we have.
I did go over the NADA value with him to make sure that I had picked the correct one and showed him. And I did have the
Okay.
right model. So we valued it based on NADA, what we have to use. And in conversation with him at the time, there was no mileage adjustment to be done. He did not mention any mileage overage. His value was based on, I think, what he had paid for his invoice.
Okay.
It's
And
got-
looking what he paid was 116 in November of 2018. So the 112 seems reasonable, especially because it's based on NADA. Okay.
So,
The motion,
motion, unique ID, 53525 to make no change. Can I get a
I'll
second?
second that.
All in favor?
There.
Aye. And that's the supplemental also.
Yeah, I got that.
Okay.
And can I, let's see, unique ID, oh, it's the same. 53525, supplemental. No change. Can I get a motion for that?
Make a motion. Oh, I'll second it then. Is that your motion?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. I'm gonna take care of those two. Do we want to address the the Harborside date stamp thing, kind of put that to bed?
I
Sure.
think that sounds good. I think I'm okay with going that they sent it.
I don't see how, I mean, I get how it seems kind of like this back and forth, but if we were to deny that, I don't see how we would be successful in a court setting. So it's a large amount too. It's not a small amount that we're talking about. Could it be a different piece of mail? I don't know. I think it's errors at that point. I don't think anything that I have that they've ever been late or are constantly. They've never paid a penalty in the past. So I think I don't know where it was for those days, but it seems to me like they try to do it or not. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I would go with accepting that they did due diligence and something went wrong, but I think maybe next time they should have it signed, a certificate, when it's delivered. But I would accept their explanation that they sent it on time and don't know what happened.
It looks like the only thing that it was on the piece of mail that arrived at the office was that Pitney Bowes stamp, which has the October 30 date. Presumably that was valid enough for the USPS to accept that postage had been paid on it. So while I'm not a USPS expert, it seems reasonable to also say that that's the date, the post date, as much as we can tell. I think that's,
There's no way for us to prove that it wasn't.
Yeah.
and it's not like there's a second, like if there were two stamps, we were having a conversation that one's a valid post stamp and one's not. That thing that we were looking at on the mail, right, not on the return receipt, that was enough to get the mail processed by the post office.
Right.
So that says that there was an October 30 date. Good enough for the post office, good enough for me, I guess.
Actually, you can stamp it with your machine in the office and then put it aside and not actually get it in the mail. So that's why they were going that extra step of showing that there was a certificate, which which seems a little different. But yes, I think the intent was there, and they've been good taxpayers for, as you said, previous years doing what they need to do. So do we make a motion to accept the appellant's confirmation that they sent the package on the correct date?
I think so.
Well, so a question.
Yeah.
I don't know, as a board, we can sit here and go, yeah, this makes a lot of sense, but the action that we would ultimately be taking is removing the late penalty. I don't think that's one of our powers.
Yeah.
However we may feel about it.
Yes, we can remove the penalty.
If it arrived on time.
Well, they're proving.
Or
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sean, sorry.
They're appealing to us saying, no, we mailed it on time. Here's our proof. So
So what we can't do is say, yes, you're late, but we're going to waive your fee. What
No,
we're
we
saying,
can't do that.
we're saying instead is the evidence we're seeing is that you weren't late and therefore a fee does not apply.
Right. I mean, well, obviously it was received late, but they proved to us that they made an attempt. Like they said, there's no way they can, wherever it may go for those days.
They're
Theoretically,
not at fault.
that's their office, but they have that date stamp, which is going to hold up in court.
Yeah.
Which makes sense, right? I'm one of the people going, yeah, this makes sense to me. But the next step is we put this into the minutes and then the assessor's office has to go and make the adjustment. Is the assessor's office able to do that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
So the motion for unique ID 4108700 is to remove the 25% late filing fee. Do I have a second?
Do we need an
Can I-
explanation?
Yeah, can I ask that we maybe restate the motion that the board is, that the board is finding that they weren't late, I think is more what we're doing.
Okay. Okay, so the
And because we're finding that they weren't late, the 25% fee does not apply. The 25% late fee is not applicable.
Okay.
I'm just trying to make sure that the way we're phrasing our motion is in line with what our powers as a board are.
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, it's all, so that would be recorded in the minutes, but the motion is whatever the action that it is. It's not necessarily what led up to the action, right?
Okay. Yeah, I like the fact that we're stating as that Harborside, Connecticut sent the package on time. Even though it didn't arrive on time, they sent it on time, so therefore the late fee should not apply.
Yeah, agreed, seconded.
Okay,
All right.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, Mr. Cohen is in our waiting room.
All right.
Let me admit him.
Hello.
Hey, Mr. Cohen, how are you?
Good. How are you?
You've got myself, Sean Bertel, as well as Lori Fernand and Regina Pine on the phone here.
Right.
We would like to just take a quick oath before we start. Do you solemnly swear and solemnly and sincerely affirm, as the case may be, that the evidence you shall give concerning this case will be the truth, the whole truth,
I do.
so help you God, upon penalty of perjury?
I do.
Okay, so we have your property documents in front of us for 15 Cobtail. Please tell us more.
Uh-huh.
Go ahead.
Cutting in and out.
Sorry, the floor is yours,
Hello.
Mr. Cohen. We can hear you.
Okay. I just wanted to, on a lighter note, the first time I heard about virtual, about 10 years ago, the doctors in New York were performing the virtual colonoscopy with the idea that it would alleviate the patient of having to go through that terrible prep. So they would take an X-ray of the bottom, and of course, unfortunately, if it showed there was a polyp, then they would have to drink the prep anyway. But that was the first time I think that virtual, that term, was ever used until we got to residential assessments.
Well, hopefully this will be more pleasant.
Yeah.
So yes, this will be a lot more pleasant than the prep.
Okay, so tell us about your property.
Yes. If I can preface, I've got some stats here. In 2017, when they did a reassessment, unbeknownst to me, a couple of the property owners had hired this particular appraisal firm. And so it turned out that I discovered, after they disclosed what they were paying in taxes, that basically there was quite a disparity, because I just relied upon getting the tax bill. So specifically, in just focusing in on one property, and they were the ones that brought my attention to it, number 11, the Rolig residence, when she told me basically her taxes appeared to be in the vicinity of $21,000, which basically were mine as well. My house was the first house built on the street, which was 1987, and their house was built in 1998. So it was about 11 years newer. Secondly, they had a little more acreage than I did. More importantly, based upon, and I presume that most of the time based on square footage is what we really go by in terms of the actual tax. And they have 6,695 square feet. And basically, without my basement, I'm at around 5,100. So obviously, number one, there's a differential in the square footage. Number two, there's a difference in the age of the home. And number three, which doesn't probably enter in the appraisal, but I've been on the interior of the home, and I'll tell you that conservatively, she's probably spent $2 million in terms of paneling, ceilings, and things of that nature, aside from the furnishings. So
We won't tell her
that's
you said,
basically. I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
we won't tell her you said that. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, that didn't come through too clear.
Go ahead, Paul.
Oh, so basically, in terms of market value, when I look at their home, and I've been here 10 years and familiar with some of the resales, I would say conservatively that her home, in terms of market value, would be 50% in excess of mine. The appraiser, I think, has arrived at a rather conservative figure of around $675,000. I think in a heartbeat, if someone were to look at her property, which is probably one of the most outstanding on the street, it would easily surpass $1 million, $1.2 million. And believe me, if we were in the market that we were in 20 or 30 years ago, I mean, with normal appreciation, that home would be in a $2.5 million market value. Unfortunately, it seems in Simsbury, the magic number is like 300,000. And when we get in excess of 500, we narrow the market considerably. And of course, obviously, one of the reasons being is basically the number of executives coming into this area is probably far fewer in number than it was 10 or 20 years ago. So that would be, my argument in terms of the fact that with a tax bill where it presently is, I would think it would, realistically, it should come in somewhere at a third less. And I think that was the purpose of my application.
Okay, yeah, we have your appraisal here. We all have a copy.
Right.
Well, there was, during the reval, there was a pretty significant reduction done back in 2016. It went from over $1 million down to about 711. So,
that was what in the 2017
yeah,
reassessment?
yes,
Right. Well, in other words, if I'm taking next door now, because I don't want to confuse the issue with 3 or 4, he did reappraise 3 or 4 homes, but basically with Rolig, if you go strictly by the square footage and you go by the aging and you go lot size or whatever, that may not be significant, but in terms of market value, they were also reassessed. And I believe that it reflected a market value in excess of $1 million. So if we use that argument, in which market value would come into consideration and the assessed value pro rata, wouldn't that indicate that for the tax bill, I believe that ours are both in the vicinity of 20 or 21,000. Wouldn't you say that's a disparity, that mine is inordinately higher compared to her value?
Yeah, I remember when we went through the reval a couple of years ago.
Right.
Quite a few of your neighbors that came through, and I do understand that the higher end properties have definitely taken a significant hit, in market value compared to anything in the 300,000 and 400,000 range, in Simsbury specifically. So I think I totally understand, and your appraisal will help us come down to a number that we think
Right.
is
Okay.
for all parties. Lori, Regina, do you guys have any questions for Mr. Cohen?
No, just what you already noted, Sean, that with the reval, the initial purchase looks like 1.175.
Yeah, well, I overpaid. Yes, I paid $1,175,000. That was back in 2010. If you remember, we came off the awful, what we call the Great Depression, though, 2008, 2009. Then real estate values began to rebound. And so naturally, per usual, my timing was lousy. And I paid more than I should have. At the time, let me explain this. I had been a resident of Longmeadow, Mass. For all my life. My partner lived in Simsbury, and after my wife passed away, I was eager to move and be near him because we've been partners for 56 years. And so I was rather anxious. And I said, I remember Cobtail as being the most beautiful street in Simsbury. So I told my companion, who I went with after my wife's death, that I wanted to make sure that it was Cobtail. And so at the time, there were, I believe, 2 properties for sale. The other one didn't appeal to me. And so I was very anxious. And I never met the seller, incidentally. They had moved to Boston. They relocated. And so, naturally the location and everything about it pleased me. And so I really, probably at the time, I probably should have paid just under $1 million, but I went hook, line, and sinker. So that what you're reiterating is true. That's what I paid for the property. Obviously, today there were 2 foreclosures on the street. One house, which is probably comparable in square footage, I believe, is sold for, I don't know, the low 700s, and then a property across the street, which is significantly lower, was sold for about $595. So, recent sales on the street are somewhat of an indicator, but I really focus in on number 11 because I think that's the best example of a house which has appreciably more value in today's market than mine would.
Okay.
So when I look at the assessment, which I can tell Francine told you to get a 2017 assessment, page 12 looks at the 5-year sales history, and it looks like there were some really useful comps that were pulled as part of it, all Cobtail Way, and most of them being in that late 2016 to mid 2017 timeframe. So when I see, based on the acreage you've got, it seems like a comparison to that 20 Cobtail is reasonable. Though, am I reading it right that there's your house is in the 5,000 square footage of usable living space?
50,
is that right?
Yeah, 5,100. And, unfortunately, I didn't have an appraiser like they did. I wasn't privy to it until Lisa Rowley notified me last year. And so I called the same agency. And obviously, I think what the main substance of this is her house compared with mine, even though at the time in 2017, maybe at that point, the assessment was reasonable. But certainly in terms of what her assessment was and mine, obviously they were pretty close to one another. And had I had the luxury of knowing this appraiser then at that point, I feel that, for example, if her tax was, let's say, at 21,000 or reduced to 21, mine would have been substantially less than that. And so, you know, I know, having studied real estate and majored that in college, one of the primary considerations is market value in terms of replacement value. And so when we go by market value, I sort of use today's market, even though they were reassessed in 2017, but nevertheless, her taxes at that point were very close to what my tax was. So my argument would be that her house undoubtedly has appreciably more value than mine. Other argument that I can't refute anything. I can't say that in 2017 that even though my market value was reduced to whatever it was, her market value was still substantially more than mine because of the fact that she had a private appraiser and I didn't.
Sure, and I guess the reason I'm drawing everyone's attention to page 12 is if I was just given the info on page 12 with I'll say 3 sales, because I see one's from 2013. 3 sales, same street.
Oh, wait a minute. Let me turn to page 12.
Sure. So the specific part is it's a table that's labeled 5-year sales history.
Page 12.
Yeah, and it doesn't look like any of the properties listed there are a perfect match to your house. You differences in acreage and some differences
Well,
in square footage.
the other prop, Phil, I think Phil Gaucher, that was a foreclosure. There were 2 of them. There was one lower on the street, and I'm just turning to page 12 here.
23 would probably be the most comparable, right?
Yeah, it's somewhere between 20, which lines up with the acreage. It's not a big acreage, or 23, yeah, which lines up closer with the square footage. So,
well, in other words,
the sale prices we've got there, and again, we're looking at August 2016
okay,
and
now
June 2017.
I'm on page. Now I'm on page 12. 20 cocktail. See, number 11, I see is not on here. It lists 6, 16, 19, 25.
Which look like they based just on how that's titled. That looks probably like active listings in 2019.
Are you referring to the 5-year history?
Yeah, because what's nice
Right.
about that table is it includes the time period that the town reeval was happening, 2017. So the 3 prices that are late 2016 to 2017 seem like they're really good, useful data for this conversation.
Well, you know, what I'm relying on, I shouldn't be, in other words, if the others used a private appraiser and I didn't, I don't think I should be penalized. In other words, basically, we should use comparative values. And certainly there's been enough history that, for example, a house that was the size of mine, not in the condition maybe, but all of these homes, you'll notice, number one, they were built 1996, 1995, 1999. Mine was built in 1987. So the first thing you go, I don't know if you use age, but to me, square footage would be the most significant thing. And, you know, you're taking, for example, if you take 20 Cobtail, that had 7,000 feet in it. The only thing that look at number 23, that had 5,200. Number 7 Cobtail had 4,500 feet. Now, 7 Cobtail, I believe, I'm not sure now, 7. Oh,
yeah,
yeah,
that was a 2013 sale. So I guess, not that it's not important, right? It's within the same 5 years, but 23 was the one that was really catching my eye. And that does seem to put us in the mid 7s for what would be a a fair market value for similar properties around the time that the
Well,
reassessment was happening?
Yeah, well, number 23, I know that house. That house, I was in there when he bought it. Number 23, that was originally on the market for $1.5 million. He bought it $739,000. That was Joe Pasco. 5,200 square feet based upon square footage. Yes, it's similar to mine. But now he bought, let's see, there was a sale on that property on 23 a couple of years ago. Am I right?
2016?
Yeah, the present owner is Pascal, Pascal. But I'm comparing mine with number 11. In other words, you got to do apples to apples here. In other words, if their house in 2017, under the reappraisal and under the luxury of having a private appraiser, they came in with taxes of $21,000. So
I'm
if
sorry,
we
is
look,
11 in one of the documents you sent us?
pardon?
You keep
sorry.
referencing number 11. I'm not
I'm
seeing
referencing
that.
number 11. Of course, she originally told me her taxes were $17,000. That's when I really went into orbit, because I said, that's ridiculous. Mine were close to 21. Well, I found out that when I Googled the property, it looked like her taxes were $21,000. And simply, I think it's pretty open and shut in that it's a no-brainer. Her taxes are 21. How can mine? Her property is certainly, even in terms of the time when it was reassessed in 2017, certainly the market value, and you don't have it down here, but the market value of 11 Cobtail was in excess of $1 million, up to $1.2 million. And so my property, is based upon that. Why should my tax bill be what hers is? It doesn't, not for a property that immediately, for a quick sale, would certainly bring 50% more than what my property would be on the market value. And not only on the incredible internal structure, but just on the fact of the square footage, which a lot of this is based on, obviously. She's got 698, almost 6,700 feet. So the house is, roughly 20, almost 30% larger in square footage. And that's what I look at. I mean, that's why I went through all of this, the expense of hiring, finding out who the appraiser was, and then feeling that after we drew up this report, that it would speak for itself, that certainly it's evident that her house is worth appreciably more than mine is, in addition to the square footage factor.
Mr. Cohen, the only issue,
Yes.
we'll take a look at, when we deliberate, we'll pull up her property card and take a look at it. The property you're
Right.
we don't have any, we're only going by the properties that are in your appraisal, and that one's not in there. So
I know. I don't know.
that information.
I don't know why you didn't put it in. I can see that why he didn't use number 11. But in other words, I'm certainly
The good thing, Mr.
satisfied.
Cohen, is, a couple of times you've referenced the property being at $1 million. The good thing, for better or worse, the 2017 reval decreased the price, that 1 million plus number. So the baseline number that we're dealing with is already in the, in the low 8s. So I think what we're trying to look at is, from the data that we've got here, sounds like there's still an argument that it should be below the mid 8s, and we're just trying to figure out where that is. And 11 is not one of the
in other words,
properties we have.
let's look at 6 Cobtail Way. Going by that, here's a house that's at 6698. So that is almost identical to the square footage on number 11. So original asking price at that point was $1,025,000. I
But
see
the current asking
asking
points is still around 8. So I feel like we were going in the right direction with looking at 23.
right. But in other words,
Detail is that
talking-
foreclosure.
number 6, I think number 6 was, number 6 was the foreclosure. That was the foreclosure.
Yeah, the brick one.
That number 6 was a foreclosure.
Yeah.
And so, it naturally it was depressed. Original asking price. In other words, the bank had to get rid of it. Obviously, using both 6 and across the street, they were both distressed properties in relation that they were foreclosures. So I mean, simply again, if someone came up and looked at the two houses, number 11 and number 15, it's like night and day. But why should my tax, even though it was reassessed and they had a private appraiser and I didn't, why should my tax be the same as hers? Now, in argument, I don't want someone going around and increasing her tax and saying, well, Paul Cohen, because of the fact that he presented this, we've undertaxed your property. That isn't my purpose. My purpose is basically just comparing the two properties. I don't feel that my tax bill should be anywhere near hers with a property that in today's market, no matter what the market calls for, that in any type of market, distressed or not, that certainly her house would bring 50% more in terms of price, in terms of today's price, that as opposed to mine. And in other words, basically it comes down to this. We're talking about a home with 30% more square footage and we've got the same tax bill. So, I can't see why there's that disparity.
Yeah, I think with the appraisal that you submitted us, we'll take a look at that other property that you're referencing. We've got
Right.
determination. Lori, do you have any questions?
Nope, I'm all
No,
set.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, that's quite all right. I was going to say, the appraisal is definitely very helpful and we can take a look at the property cards for neighboring properties to yours.
Right. That's all I asked for. I mean, I think certainly if in all deference, if you look at a number 11 and you look at mine, that's all I can ask for. In other words, is it fair? In other words, is it fair? Or is my tax too high? Or is it in line? That's your decision, not mine.
Yeah.
So I think that's all I can ask for.
No, I think I'm good. Thank you, Mr. Cohen.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Cohen. We will deliberate and we will send you a letter in the mail.
Thank you for your time.
All right.
All right, thank you.
Very much.
Right.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye. What a nice guy. How's everybody doing out there?
Doing all right. I was trying to see if I could pull up the property card of 11. Cocktail went on my phone, but it's not having luck.
I think Francine is trying to pull it up.
Okay.
You guys want to just continue on or do you need a break?
I'm okay to continue.
Okay.
Yeah.
We just had a break. Oh, excuse me.
Do we want to do, so we're done now, right, with hearings?
What about 42 Munisket?
She was going to be a
It's not
call,
shown.
but she's
Okay,
unlikely to call in, I guess.
okay.
Okay, so I need to plug my computer in because my battery's dying. Do you guys want to, is there one you guys want to do? You guys have any thoughts on anything?
Well, I guess the one that I was thinking, oh shoot, where did I put them? It's all the Highcroft. I just think that one is incredibly challenging, and
I think we need Francine
for that,
for that.
okay.
Because I don't know, my takeaway from all of that was 115 a square foot, which
Seemed like we were on track.
reasonable to me.
What's
That didn't strike me. It's not like it was 215 a square foot. It's still, yeah, okay, detached, not attached, but I'm of two minds of that one. One is, that seemed pretty reasonable to me. And two is, it is such a high dollar value. Traditionally, the board has just passed on things that were really, really high dollar value because.
That's what I was thinking, but Sean, you might have other insight.
No, we did. Laura, you were there when they came through the last time. Remember?
And did they present us with what
They did.
they thought was a fair assessment, and we went with that?
They gave us a best, worst, middle, and I think we went with the middle scenario. So
Okay.
this time they gave us a best and worst, or best and second best, I guess.
Best in 20% delta, which didn't seem to have it. It just seemed like we were being, there was grounding bias in, and if it's 20% less, I'm not sure it's a valid way to start calculating townhouses. Another big difference from at least what I'm remembering, if this is the folks I remember, some of the larger properties that I remember we have dealt with in the past were coming to us having already gone through some of that work with the assessor's office. And so it was coming with a recommendation of the assessor's office, how to handle that sort of thing. Is the assessor's office making a similar recommendation to guide us on this one?
I think I'm trying to find where that packet is. I'm not sure that there's a full understanding of the way that it was handled by David previously.
Okay.
And I had mentioned it in meeting with the guy. Why didn't we assign a value to the clubhouse? I don't know how that. His explanation makes sense to me. I kind of remember it once he said that, but when
It needs to be the value needs to be somewhere, right? There is value to the whole property
as a whole. Yeah.
Yeah. So whether it's, hey, there's 2 lots and we're only going to apply the clubhouse to one of them. Okay. Or it's going to be a factor across all the units, but to just say, hey, there's no, what was the line? There's no revenue coming in from the clubhouse, so we don't count it. For a community, there is value to having a clubhouse, just like any other communal asset. So again, it was just stuff like that made me go, I'm reluctant to overturn the storied experts on this one. Not that I think there's anything duplicitous or on purpose. It just, there's a lot of little pieces to this this one.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I finally got the paperwork here. So, I mean, if you look at what we did when you're talking about it, when you're going from 88 to, what did we say, 115? That's per square foot, and you're talking about 100,000 square feet. So it is a big difference about the whole thing.
Yeah, I feel like I just don't have enough knowledge to be able to say, that there's $1 million off approximately for each of these, I think. So I would like some other input.
Okay, what if we look at it this way? We're at 115. Their recommendation is, let's toss the 80, say the 88 is unlikely. And then they have a $92 per square foot recommendation in concept 2, a 20% reduction from new assessment. Okay, so that's probably, we think, potentially still on the lower end, right, Regina? Where's
No.
the
Questions I have include, it sounds like the communal property wasn't included in phase 1. Was there a deliberate choice at that point made to include it in phase 2? Maybe, hey, it's not done yet. It doesn't make sense to put it in phase 1, stick it in phase 2. And now we're going to come up with numbers that don't account for it in phase 2 because we're not looking at both halves of it. That could be part of it.
That's going to be
That's the sort of thing that's making me feel really, really out of my depth picking a number there. Does 92 sound more reasonable than 88? Sure, but I still don't know that that's a valid number.
Whether there's a future value added to the clubhouse or any of the other adjoining is not that can be addressed in the next reval. There's nothing we can really do about that. So that's up to Francine to do or not do. I'm not even sure. It makes sense. I get it. And yeah, where is it? Is it split amongst them? How much is that? How much is it that you're saying each property is worth because of this clubhouse? Whatever. So I'm not quite sure how that works. My concern is that, and it was the last time they came in, is the last thing that this town wants or needs is those apartment buildings to be empty. So,
well, if we just go with the square, oh, sorry.
Yep, go
Sorry
ahead.
about that, Sean. Could you? Well, I mean, if we just use the square footage to make the adjustment and but then I guess a question is, is it only, are there other factors to take into account? I'm not as concerned about the amenities because I think those do get spread throughout on some level. And I do get certain units might have much nicer amenities. So they could, the more high end, so they would go for more. But if they're saying that Highcroft Rise 1300 through 1900 is not as
we lost
high end.
We lost Sean.
Oh, shoot. Then maybe that 115 number is off, but it's just hard. Okay, we got to wait for Sean.
My head is still at, I don't want to just pencil with a 20% reduction in what the assessor's office thought was fair. I have questions about how the phase 1 and phase 2 are being used. It seems like we're being asked to compare them in areas that it's favorable for these guys and then not compare them in areas that it's not favorable. And again, I certainly don't think it's More units per building in that phase.
Are you looking at 1,300? Regina?
I'm looking at, I'm sorry, I'm still not, this one's making me feel very dumb.
Well, it's just a lot of data and we're just in an easy.
Are you asking me questions? Do you need me to
Hi,
clarify
Francine.
anything?
Okay, I thought,
Hi, I'm sorry.
yes, please. No,
All
no,
right.
it's okay.
The first
I thought
phase.
we've been
phase-
with the technical difficulties. I thought we'd lost you. Yes, please.
Okay.
Can you explain
I
what's
was
going
off.
on in this one?
I was off for a while, and so, all right, so the first phase, those buildings have 16 units per building. There are 6 one-bedrooms at 1580 per unit and 10 two-bedrooms at 2210 per unit. David had done an income approach on them. That's the way the reval company did it when they revalued it, when they did the reval. And the second phase, there are 24 units per building. There's less buildings, so each building is valued separately too. So there are 24 units in phase 2. So each of those buildings have 4 3-bedroom units at 2210.
Okay.
There are 6 2-bedrooms and 14 one-bedroom. So there's 24 units per building on those and 16 on the other ones.
So getting back to their argument, yeah, there are simpler units, but there's more of them, meaning that these are townhouses. The square footage we're talking about is the square footage of the building with townhouses in them, not the square footage of the units.
Can you repeat that, Regina? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
It sounds like where you're going is because we're using the income approach, each of the buildings in the phase 2 is generating more income because there's more units within it.
Exactly.
And so sure, yeah, they're simpler units. Each unit might be getting a little bit less, but the amount it's less is probably not as big of a difference.
Yeah, so that's the approach that they took on it, that the assessor's office took.
So
Based on
because
income.
there were more units within that building, the income is higher, and that's where okay. All right.
Even though the rent from each of those units presumably it's probably not as premium as the phase 1 units.
I guess, and that's something that we're going to need to review because they're so new.
Because if we didn't
So
take an income of
the rate per unit was similar to phase 1 with a slight difference based on the number of bedrooms.
by what? I'm sorry. Which rate are you talking? What rate you mean?
All right. The per unit income approach
Okay.
was used. Okay.
Now,
so we
was that
used the
in
income
this-
approach?
Was that an assumed income because they were so new and the owner couldn't say, look?
Yes, it's based on data that's being used for the 17 reval. So based on rentals at that time. And that's what we have that we're using.
Are we using the income-based approach with other complexes in town?
Yes, same way.
Okay.
They're all
Okay.
done the same way.
Okay.
Of course, there's vacancy factors that come into play, and a percentage of expenses that we, take off. So, and that was taken into account also. It would be nice to have a little bit more information, like actual income on it. But unfortunately, it's a new
Okay.
building, so we didn't have that. So we used market rents based on 17's market values that we had from the revaluation at the time.
And to
of
my mind,
sale.
if there's going to be an adjustment, I would expect that it would be made once you guys had that data. And so making an adjustment without new information, it seems like we're being consistent with the logic that was used in phase one.
Yes. So again,
I think where my head is
it's up-
take no action as a board. If they've got additional data based on what their real vacancy factors are or what their real income approach is going to
yeah,
be.
so perhaps, I mean, you know, maybe there's some adjustments that could be done on the vacancy side of it, and put them in line with what we have for the previous phase. That
Is there a
something that
standard
I
amount
could
that-
give you, and I'd have to look into it, pull some data out and see if that's what you want me to look at.
Is there a standard that's used as far as vacancy when there is no data available? No actuals? Because if that exists and we apply that.
Yeah, and it's based, yeah, so it's
Sorry,
based on,
I'm gonna let my
again,
dog
the,
out so I hear less background noise. I'll be right back.
so again, it's, I'll wait for them to come back.
Okay. I'm wondering if we can get Sean back.
He is rebooting,
Perfect.
trying to launch. He's had an unsuccessful relaunch and is rebooting.
And I honestly do not remember why we did make the adjustment, except Sean was saying, you know, we had the three options and we went with the middle way.
Hello, sorry about that.
No worries, Sean is rebooting.
So I left, as you guys were talking, vacancy assumptions.
Are you still there, Francine?
Yes. Looks like we don't have Sean still.
Battery died.
Oh, for his computer?
Yep.
Okay.
And he's now
So
had
maybe this would be a good time for a break.
Okay.
You gotta take another break.
Okay. All right. Give it a few minutes.
All right.
I'll see you in 10 minutes or so.
7:15 return.
All right.